Even in today's world of GPS, smartphones, and endless connectivity, the wild remains a place of mystery. Every year people enter national parks and vast forests. Some never return. Strange lights, eerie sounds, and unsettling disappearances continue to baffle experts and locals alike. But what if the answers aren't as simple as getting lost? What if the wilderness holds secrets science can't explain? Join me as we explore chilling real-life encounters from the most remote corners of the Earth stories that will leave you questioning what might still be out there, watching us. Story number 1. In 2017, my boyfriend, which is now my husband, and I went camping in eastern Pennsylvania. The place we decided to stop for the night was primitive. Camping was free, no cell service, barely a road, etc. We did encounter 2 other people. They might not factor into what happened later at all, but they were creepy, so I'll describe them anyway. The first was a woman who had her truck off to the side of the road, a little as we drove past. She had the hood open and seemed to be waiting for someone to stop and offer to help. Usually my boyfriend had no problem helping someone, but he said this time something felt off. She didn't really seem like she needed help, and usually people who need help look at you hopefully as you approach. She looked like she just expected we would stop. That's what my boyfriend said anyway. I hadn't really noticed anything that's strange about her. The next person came when we had chosen a spot and were setting up a fire for hot dogs. I had noticed people drive by a few times, but my boyfriend pointed out each time was the same car, and the man in the car watched us each time he had passed. My boyfriend was a little uneasy about this, but we had driven around for a while before finding a place we liked. It had been raining and everything was muddy, and we wanted the driest side possible. He could have been doing the same thing. We briefly thought about moving, but the road was too muddy. If he wanted to find us, all he had to do was follow the tracks. There were some other tracks, but not many. He would only have to backtrack a little to locate us again. He didn't come by another time, so we stayed and spent several remaining hours before dark goofing off. No one else drove by. Whether or not those 2 had anything else to do with our experience, the real fear came later. We had gone to sleep in our tent, and sometime around 3 AM, we were awoken by this very loud noise. I can't describe it very well or even remember exactly what it sounded like, but my boyfriend said it reminded him of a chain gun revving up. It was also similar to how it would sound if someone recorded a shovel being dragged over gravel and played it over a loudspeaker, is another way he described it. He jumped up and looked out of the little window but couldn't really see anything. The sound repeated itself another few times. I was too scared to speak, so my boyfriend whispered that it was probably miles off and I should go back to sleep. I didn't question this, as I figured loud sounds could be easily heard miles off. After we left, he told me it sounded like it had actually been coming from just down the road, but he didn't want to freak me out. Looking back, I probably should have wondered why he would bother to whisper if apparently the sound was far off. I was still terrified. Every little thing I heard outside sounded like someone was walking around the tent. We lay there for a while longer, when finally my boyfriend told me to get dressed because we were leaving. I got alarmed by this, and even more alarmed when he unwrapped the machete we had bought just for this trip from its plastic before opening the tent. We quickly packed up and loaded the car. I looked around for footprints that weren't our own, but despite the moon providing plenty of light, I couldn't really see anything. I did point out something my boyfriend hadn't noticed though. Before we got into the car, there was a beer can by our dead fire that hasn't been there before. We didn't even bring any beer. While we were driving away, my boyfriend explained that he was nervous someone might have been trying to lure us out, so he didn't think it was a good idea to run from the tent right away. He also half expected to find out gas tank had been siphoned out, but that wouldn't have stopped because we had a hybrid car. We joked that would make a funny hybrid car commercial. Number of brutal murders avoided by driving a hybrid, 2. We only joked because we were about shitting ourselves from fear and adrenaline. Even then. The rest of our trip we only stayed in well-populated campsites or got a hotel. Story number 2. I have a friend who is a trail ranger. Basically a ranger who can't get you in trouble. He told me about this time he was gathering illegal placed wildfire cameras and knocking down hunting stands, feeders and blinds with another actual ranger. The other ranger wasn't feeling well, so he had said he was going to head back, as it is a 1-hour ATV ride. Fran finished up the last one when he heard voices. Keep in mind he's far off the beaten path. He called out, but no one replied. As it was getting dark, he started to head back and found that his ATV wouldn't start. He then noticed that the battery was not connected anymore. He had reconnected it and started to drive, but it wasn't going fast at all. Less than half a mile later, the whole thing died. He radioed back, basically saying, "Hey guys, I need someone to come pick me up." They told him they would, but it would be an hour. He asked if the other guy got back, and they said no. He set it down and started a small fire, but before long, he heard voices again. It's dark, he's not happy. The voices sound like an argument now. Someone was angry and yelling at someone else, who sounded more scared. He called out and asked if anyone needed help. The voices didn't seem to care. He guessed they had been less than 1,000 feet away. He radioed again and they said they were having trouble finding what path he might be on and haven't left yet. He asked them just to get the other ranger to tell them where they are, because he left with the iPad that had the map. They said he's still not back. About 3 more minutes go by and he hears the voices start up again. He decides to walk to them, hoping maybe they can stop being drunk assholes and maybe have a map. He walked in their direction, but the voices seemed to getting further as he got closer. Finally, after 20 minutes, he gave up and walked back. He got a radio call and they said the other guy was found passed out, covered in vomit and was being taken to the hospital, but he crossed off everywhere. They found a stand, so they have a general idea where he is. Then the radio died. Then the voices came back. Bored out of his mind, he decided to listen to what they were arguing about, picking up things like, "Well, it wasn't yours to take. I don't fucking care, you knew better," and so on. His guess was 2 hunters arguing over a kill. Then he heard the shot, something intelligible, then silence, then he dosed his fire and hid. After that he had nothing, just his breathing for the next half hour until he saw ATV lights. He told the guy picking up everything and they called back. They had people looking for 3 hours and found nothing. They came back the next day with police and dogs. After about an hour, a shallow grave was found, and in it was a long dead man who had clearly been shot in the face. Thing was, it was a skeleton who was there for years. So either the argument he heard just ended with a bang and both parties went home last night, or he heard the murder of someone from many years ago. Story number 3. Not a ranger, but I used to be in a group that's somewhat like the scouts, so we spent a lot of time in the woods and some weird shit happened often. But most of the time it was easy to explain. One thing happened though that to this day scares the living shit out of me. I was the leader for the age group 8 to 10 years old and we were out on a camping trip. It was the first year we stayed on the terrain and it was huge. Normally we tend to explore the majority of the terrain before the kids arrive, so we were aware of any possible dangerous spots to avoid. This time it was just impossible. Every camp we had what we call a night game. It's usually a scary game in which the kids have to complete several tasks, while we, the leaders, scare the evolving shit out of them. Obviously, we had one too during that camp. We masked up as monsters and hid out in the woods close to the checkpoints they had to pass. While running in between checkpoints, I found an open stretch of forest with little to no foliage, so it was ideal for chasing after them. There was no real room to hide besides the trees, so I couldn't use my flashlight or they would be able to see me from miles away. It was dark, like in the unsettling kind of dark. That plays tricks on your eyes and you start imagining things that aren't real. During my stay there, I saw a shadow that was around my size running past me a few times. I couldn't see it very well, so I just assumed I was imagining things because nothing was there when I turned my flashlight on. The game was nearing its end and I saw the shadow again. This time I could see it vaguely, standing near a tree, not too far away from me. I thought it was one of the other leaders hiding to scare the kids and decided to go over there as it was about time to get back. I aimed my flashlight towards the tree and while getting closer I noticed that there was indeed someone standing there, dressed in what looked like a torn burlap sack and had their head covered with a few white plastic bags that looked like they were tied together. I started to feel pure dread, something felt really off. I asked if everything was okay, but they didn't respond. The only thing I heard was this weird sound that sounded like someone's knocking on wood. Nevertheless, I went a bit closer until I was about 10 meters away from this person. The knocking sound turned out to be their person, smacking his head repeatedly into the tree, and I noticed he looked like a male. He was barefoot and his arms and legs were covered with crusted mud. His hands were in a weird cramped position. I was convinced this was just one of the other leaders pulling a prank, so I told them to knock it off. He slowly turned his head and started walking towards me. Something inside me just told me to run. It didn't matter if it was just a prank, and I ran away scared for nothing. If this wasn't a prank, it felt like I was in serious danger, so I ran as fast as I could. I heard him running after me, but I didn't want to turn around to look as I probably ran into a tree. I arrived back at the campsite and every single person that could be dressed like that was already there. They couldn't have gotten there before me, and if they did, they sure as hell didn't have the time to change into their regular clothes. Still, I told them that they gave me a good scare with that. They just looked weird at me, thinking I was trying to scare them, and we left it at that. Next day I wanted to go check it out. Who knows, maybe some weirdo ate the wrong mushroom and might be out there dying from hypothermia. I took someone else with me just in case, and there was nothing but endless trees. We arrived at the tree where I saw the person banging his head, and there was a dead-skinned, decomposing rabbit nailed to the tree. We called the cops. They looked around quickly and brushed it off as just a prank from another scouting group or some kids from the nearby town, and left it at that. We didn't notice anything weird after that, so it probably was a dumb prank, but seriously, some people have a fucked up sense of humor. If you watched until here, please let me know some feedback in the comments. Also, thank you very much for listening to my narration.